Hello guys, good evening and welcome to today's class. Um for the past 2 or 3 classes now we've been talking about Django Rest Framework, right? And in last class we were able to learn how to create endpoints with Django Rest Framework, creating a post endpoint, put endpoint, hello guys, a get endpoint, and also a delete endpoint, right? So today we are going to look into user authentication with Django Rest Framework. So okay, so let's define some of the terms we have on the topic. So we have user, we have authentication. So what is a user? I guess we all know that, right? User is like a person trying to access a system or trying to perform some kind of operations on a particular system. And authentication means granting access to the user to perform those operations, right? So today we are going to look into granting access to users, right? So we are going to authenticate users with Django Rest Framework. All right, so let's go right into the code now. So in the last class, we created an app, an API, and in this app, we're able to create models for students to register, right? And we created some models, and also we serialized the fields, and also create views using the class-based views. And so today, right, I'm going a different route. I'm going to implement I'm going to implement the function, the class-based views, but not generic views this time. I'm going to be using the API views, right? So you would see the difference in those two methods, in those two views, right? Remember in last class, we have three, I mentioned we have 3 type of views. If we check the Django Rest Framework documentation, right? So let me see if I could bring that up. Okay. So in Django Rest Framework documentation, we have 3 type of views: the API, the function-based view, the generic views, and the class API view. So those are like the 3 ways by which you can process your views in Django Rest Framework. So today I'm going to use the API views. So first we'll start by creating a new app, right? So we'll create a new app called accounts. So I'm using an external terminal, right? So we do Python manage.py start app accounts, and okay, so I just made a typo. I'm going to do that again. So let's just cancel this and do Python manage.py start app accounts. Yes, that's the right one. And then it creates an account, right? So we check in here, we should have, yep, and our other files. So the first thing you should always do, right, when you create a new account, when you create a new app, is to always register it in your installed apps in your settings file, right? And then we do accounts. Great. So, and next thing, we go into the project URLs and register our app also. We can call this accounts, include accounts.urls, which we haven't created yet. And in the accounts folder, we create a new file, urls.py, and then, so let me just do a quick Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V there, and paste here, so we are not, okay, so as we go along, we'll see the patterns we are going to need. So yeah, so we created a new app for our to handle the accounts app, right? So next thing is we are going to use there's an inbuilt user model in Django, which I know some of you have already been introduced to in the Django class, right? And even in the current task you guys are attempting right now, you are all being asked to use that. And also we are going to, and also we are going to, all right, so let's start first. We created the account, and so we are going to be making use of the Django inbuilt user model, as I said earlier. And so we won't need to create a separate models, right? So we just create a serializer file, and the serializers.py. We import from Rest Framework, we import serializers, right? And then, so we create a class, user. I don't know if this is big enough, so let me just increase it a little bit so you guys. Okay, yeah, great. So user serializer. So this can be anything, right? You can name this anything you want it to be. Then serializers.model serializer, right? So, and then we serialize our fields, right? So we say, so in the inbuilt model, we have some fields already. So we have to also import the model, which is from Django dot contrib dot auth dot models. Yep. So import user, the inbuilt user model, and also I'm going to be importing another validators. From of the validators, imports unique validator, right? So I'm going to tell you what this does in a bit, right? This is for serializing the fields, and this is for creating making use of Django inbuilt user model. So as I said earlier, this inbuilt user model already has some predefined fields in them. So we'll be making use of those fields. So we have email field in there, and we do serializer dot email field, right? And probably you can set this to required, yep, equals true. I don't know, my VS Code IntelliSense should be working, but anyways, manage. So validators, yeah, so what this validator does is we want to make sure that this email field is unique. That was why I imported the unique validator, to make sure that this email field is unique in the database. So what we'll do is we set validators equals to unique, which I imported, unique validator, right? And then we do the query sets on the user model, user.objects.all, right? So let me just take this down so you could see clearly, right? So validators is querying the user model to check if the email field already has, probably a user already have an email abc@email.com, and another user trying to register uses abc@email.com. All this does is it goes into the model field, checks if abc@email.com is already there, it returns an error. So we are going to test that also. And yeah, okay, so that's it. So let me just do a duplicate for these, and turn this to username serializer.display char field, right? A character field, car field, or yeah, anyone. So and also a unique validator, because we want the username to be unique. And then, yeah, we also have a password field. So let's leave it at that. Password field will also be character field, but this would not need a unique validator, right? I would not need a unique validator, and probably it requires this. So we can, all we can do is set the minimum length to, let's say, 8. Yeah, so minimum length to 8. Great. Right, so we have 3 fields, serializing 3 fields. And then, so what we'll do next is we create a method in our serializer to create, like to add this method. When we send a request, this method is going to take those data and create them in this user model, right? So we have method create. So we call that method create, and because it's a method, of course, it's going to take in self and yeah, right? So taking that parameter, you can call this anything, right? I just decided to call it validated data, right? And then we would call the create method user.object.create. So this user has a method create, right? That takes in these data and like store them in the database. So we do validated data email, right? And also validated data username, right? And also validated data password. Great. So those are the 3 fields, right? And then we return user. So as I said earlier, this all it does is it creates the user in the database and then it returns the user. So yeah, so we've created our serializer and also the method to undo creating of user in database. Right, and also this is going to take in a class method, right, to handle some other things, and set the model to user and fields. That's going to be a list or a tuple either, right? So you can use anyone, ID, email, right, user name, and also what else? Password, right? Yes, password. Great, great. So what we'll do now is next thing now is to okay. So let's write some tests, right? Yes, because we've written some tests in our class. So let's just revise our test. So I'm going to write some tests now on this serializer. So to do that, we come into our test as pure file. We import some modules, right? So from REST framework dot tests, right? Import API test case. Import API test case. So all these things are in the documentation. You don't have to cram anything, right? You can easily go to documentation and retrieve all of these things. We also import, I think I just copied that here. So we also import these because we'll be needing that also. What else? We also, so import status to like get a status code, right? If our request is successful or not. So, okay, so those are basically what to be importing. Probably as we go along, if I missed out something, just import it. So the next thing now is to create a class, right? So let's say class. user test, right, is going to take an API test case, right? So, and we do dev setup self. So we say self dot test user equals to user dot objects dot create. So, but instead of saying validated data, now it should be create user, we impute those whatever details. So probably the username, right? Username will be right. So username will be let's say example, and then the email will be example at email.com. And then we also have the password as example or whatever, right? So we're going to be using that test case, and then we do self dot create URL equals to reverse count, which we are going to create this soon. Count creates. Right, so we're supposed to import this reverse. So I'll just do it from Django dot core dot URLs resolvers. You can check out the Django documentation for that import reverse. Right, so we imported reverse, and then so this is like the basic setup, and then we call the tests underscore create underscore user passing self, and then data equals to, so we say data username fuba, right? Email, say fubar at example.com, and then the password will be some password, right? So return response equals to self.clients dot posts. So we call this self.create method, create URL, and we're passing data. Format is JSON. Format is JSON, yeah, because fields are supposed to be serialized, right? So then we want to make sure we have two users, right? Because we created one user here, and also we are creating another user here. So we want to make sure that our test has two users in database. So what we do is we call self.assert equal, right? Self.assert equal, we do, so users, we just query the DB, we do user.object.count, right? We'll count the models and see if it is true. So we set that to true. So this line asserts if the number of users in the database is 2. So if it is not 2, then definitely our test will fail. And also, so when we run that, we want to return a response status code of 201, which means created, right? So do self.assert equal, and then we say response dot status code, and say status equals http underscore 201 underscore created, right? So this should be status dots. Yep. Okay, great. So this returns a 201 created, and also Okay, so we might want to just return the username just to make sure. So equal response.data username, and so I want to return both username, data username. So return both username that we created. So we should return example and fuba, right? And and also we do that for the email field. Email. So it checks if that's two email in there. And then we also do sats. All right, so we also do self.assert, but that will not be equal. So we do self.assert false. In response.data. Right, great. So in the above code, all we have done is that, so we wrote the test case, right? We wrote the test case, we imported the class API test case from REST framework instead of the normal test case from Django. So we are using API test case from DRF instead. So to check the test, we will run Python managers py tests, right? So, but if we run that test, we should get an error. So let us try to run it and see Python manage.py test. So you should get an error saying something about URLs, which I said I was going to create earlier, but I didn't create. So Python manage.py test says yes, from Django resolvers reverse. So and filter, right? Okay, so what we'll do now is we create the URL. So, but before then, let's go to our views and create a view. So we import some modules from Rest Framework dot views, import API view, right? I really hope I've not made any typo because my IntelliSense doesn't seem to be working right. So response from so the response should be response. So this returns a JSON response, right? And also want to import status code from Django status code import. So yeah, from REST framework import status. And what else? Okay, so from serializers, right? We want to import the user serializer we created earlier, and also we import the user model. Yeah, great. So, and then we create our class user create. You can name that anything. That's the name of your class. You can name that anything you wish to name it. So, okay, so let's create our class and we'll pass in API view. And then the next thing now is we write a post request, because when you are creating a new user, that should be a post request, right? So we pass in self and then requests. So we can specify the format to JSON, JSON, great. And then we let us return a response for now. Response, let's see, hello. Okay. So what we did was we defined an API view for creating our, user, right? Our user. So soon add the other logics, but for now, let's create the URLs. So in our URLs, that's py file I left empty earlier. So we do path right? We do path, and then we say create user, right? And then yeah, so we already imported the view, so we just call views dot user creates dot as view, right? And then we can also give it a name. Name equals to account creates. So yeah, so we have defined our URLs, and what we do next now is to make sure we are referencing the right URLs. So which I already did earlier to register in our project URLs on that already, right? So and we move on to the next thing now, which is, so let's run the test again, and we should see an assertion error, right? Let's see. Okay, so Python manage.py tests. So we should have an assertion error. So where is it? Okay, so we have a module error here. It says no module named Django.core.resolve. Okay, so I think I made a mistake when importing. Right, so let's correct that in our tests. Right. So let me just do a quick check on YouTube to check if there's any question. I don't know. Okay, I don't always get this testing. It is too convoluted. Agbola DG. All right, so you could testing. Our testing is very straightforward thing. So we just read on Django documentation, right? It's just to make sure that your logic is doing exactly what you want it to do, right? So yeah, so I made a mistake in my imports, right? It should be from Django.urls import reverse, right? So from node.core, yes, so from Django.urls import reverse. So let's try this again. Python manage.py run server, and we should have an assertion error. Oh, I ran server instead of running test Python manage.py tests. Okay, so yeah, so we have Django reverse account create not found. Account create is not a valid function name. So okay, so let's check that, saying it's not a valid function name. Also, when we're creating our URL, right, we should have done. Okay, so yeah, I made a mistake here. I imputed an equal to instead of this, right? So it's referencing the name of these URLs in the tests. So let's run Python manage.py test again. Yeah, right. So, and we have an assertion error. Great. So So that means we are not creating the user object. So we need to make some changes. So now in our views now, we input the logic to create our user object. So to do that, we just taking our serializer field, say serializer equals user serializer. This is going to take data equals requests data, and then we perform a check if serializer is valid. That is, if the data is valid, then we go on to do serializer.save, which I assign to a variable serializer. Right. So the next thing now is so we've saved our serializer, and then if user then return a response. So let's just take this in. So return response serializer.data, and also status code, which is equals to status dot so we're returning a 201 status code, right? HTTP 201 created, right? So this is like a basic view. You know, in the other type of view that I used, like virtually all of these logic were handled automatically. I just needed to pass in the serializer. I don't know if I can bring that up. So I just needed to, input the query set and the serializer class, and everything is handled. So, right. So this is another way you can create a post request with API view, right? So now let's run test again and see what's error, right? Python manage.py tests. So it says create takes one position argument, but 4 were given. Okay, so let's check that. Create takes one position argument, but 4 were given. So let's check our serializer in here, right? We virtually have one parameter in there. Let's see. Okay, so this should have been create user, right? Because in our tests, we were referencing create user. Yep. So run the test again and see. Okay, so our test does not pass. It says email is not equals to username. So probably because in our serializer, email, username, and password came first. So when we're calling this class, I think I called the username first, right? So the email should come first, and then we have the user, which is example, and boom, right? So also in this case, I'm just going to take this up. Yeah, great. So let's run that again. So you will see that this test is actually showing me where exactly are my errors, and then once I can fix all of that, then okay, so session error again. So it's on line 28. Let's see. Okay, probably it should go up, right? So Python let's provide tests. Okay, so it says assertion error full bar is not equals to. Okay. So let's see. So it seems the field, right, is taking in different. Let's see that error again. It says full bar is not equals to. Okay, so let me check my serializer again. I have the email, username, and password. Email, username, and password. And then my test, email, username, password, email, and password. Right. Okay. All right. So I think the create user, right, should, the way this method was created, the username should come first, right? So as I said earlier, these things, you are not even meant to cram them at all. You just, you know, use, check the documentation, right? And yeah, you'll be able to use them and read more and understand them. So you don't have to cram anything at all. So it takes in the username first, right? And then the email and then the password. So let's make those correction. Username and email. Great. Okay. So on our test, let's check our test also to make sure we're passing in username first. So I guess that's what I should have done earlier instead of this. Yeah. Great. So let's see again. Right, so it says assertion error true is not false. All right, so what that means is that why we have that error is because we are returning a password in the payload, right? So we are not supposed to return a password. So in our serializer field, we have to set the password field to write only. So do write only equals to true. Write only. Yeah, so write only equals to true. So write only. Oh yeah, this should be an underscore. Write only equals to true. Great. All right, so let's run the test again. Hopefully this time it passes. And then we know that we have successfully written this view to create our user, right? So we're able to write a test for our user serializer, and the test passed successfully, meaning that we have covered some edge cases, and our view is doing exactly what we want it to do, right? It's doing exactly what we want it to do. And now we move on to next. Okay, so we can also write tests for some other things. Yeah, I'm going to be talking more about the test. So in the defaults, like in the inbuilt user model, there are some errors, there are some edge cases already covered, like the email already exists, which we've checked that for the unique user. Probably when filling in the details, you didn't input a username, or the username is too long, or provide the password is too short, right? So we can have all of these errors, right? Can have all of these errors. Email, probably email is taken, which we have covered that, or probably an invalid email format, right? So all of these test cases should be covered, right? When we are writing tests, we can write tests for all of this. So maybe we can just write tests for 2 of those, right? So let's see, let's write test to check for a short password. You know, in our serializer, we wrote that the length of password should be 8. Now let's write a test. That's so what we'll do is say dev so your test should already start with test create user. I'm just trying to make this descriptive. Create user with short password, right? Yeah, that is descriptive enough, right? So we create so what we'll do, what we'll pass in here is, so let's just copy this, right? And then the password, this is more than 8. So input, let's just say full, right? This is 3. So then we'll do all these blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to copy these and make a few changes, right? And make a few changes to that. So, all right, so we are not checking. Okay, so we check for user count, but user count should be 1, right? Because, yeah, user count should be 1. And also, this should return, where is it? Take up, we should return. Okay, so it's here. Copy this. Self dot. Okay, so that the user count 1 user, and also, so instead of 201 created, you know, we imputed a wrong no, this should fail, right? So instead of created, you're supposed to get a status code of 400. Yes, 400, which is bad request. You can easily check out status codes online, right? So this is status code of bad requests. Bad requests. So this is going to return status code 400 bad requests, and also do count and check the length. So we don't need these, right? So we do assert dot equal. We're checking the length of response. Let's check out the length of the password. Password should be 1, right? Okay. And we can also create another error for a user that has no password. So I'll just do copy paste here. So this is going to be fast. Test create user with no password, and then we leave this empty. So this will also return a bad request, and yep. All right, so just leave the other thing there. So we run. All right, so let's run the let's run our test again and see if it passes or it fails. This is probably going to fail. I don't know. I feel like it's going to fail. Yes. So it fails, and then it says certain error expected a response, blah blah blah, to be returned from the view got retrieved. Okay. So we were supposed to, in our views, we were supposed to return because our view failed, right? We're supposed to return something. You know, we only return created. So if the serializer fails, right, we should return a response that says not created, right? So we do serializer dot error, right? Serializer dot error, and we change the status code to status dot http 400 bad requests. Great. So now our test should run successfully. So it says test field says user object has no attributes, error. Okay, so so this should be errors, not error. And then I use py test. And we have again two failures saying true is not false and true. Okay, so I think I should have removed a line from the test, which I didn't. Yep, I should have removed this and this. So I'll change it to py. So on our test passes, right, we've written, so it says here run 3 tests and okay, all 3 tests pass successfully. So we've written three tests. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3, and all 3 pass. So all of these tests is just to make sure that all our endpoints are doing what is expected, and users are not just imputing some invalid function. So I think we've written enough tests, right? So let us move on to the main deal. So yeah, so we've written our what's it called? We've written the views. So now we want to go to tokens. So right, tokens are like token-based authentication are used for REST frameworks in case probably you are going to be, your app is going to probably be used by some front end, like maybe probably React or something similar. So we are going to be using tokens, and we need to add a line to our settings. So we'll go to the settings .py, and then we add this REST framework .auth token. Did I write that correctly? Yes, those REST framework .auth token. Yeah, great. And also, we will need to add in here. So we also need to add this, right? So this is like in our REST framework documentation. I think it should, yeah, this is it, right? So just to you can easily check out the documentation for that. So what we did here is from the default authentication class, we're making use of auth token. There are different types of token authentication. There's the JWT, right? JSON Web Token, and some other tokens. So but we're just using auth token authentication in here. And so in our API view, we'll implement the token authentication. So in here we say if token equals to, so we need to import it, right? We need to import from need to import from REST framework dot auth token dot models import token. So because we are going to make use of that, so we say token dot objects dot create user equals user, right? And then we serialize the field. So JSON equals to serializer.data. So we want to add the token into the field. So it says JSON token equals to token. So now we have also added token to the fields we are creating from our view. So token equals to token. And then, yeah, so that is virtually how to create the user model. To create a user authentication with Django Rest Framework, right? So we have written tests. These are just few tests. You can also write tests to check some other things I listed earlier. And then can, so this is basically how to create a token authentication, user authentication in Django Rest Framework, right? So probably we need to perform some few tests before we end class. So let's run the server, right? And so it says F3 migration. So let's just run Python manage.py migrate. Yep. So let me run server. So we open up Postman, which I mentioned in the last class, is used for making API requests. So create a new one. So we're making a post request to the endpoints, right? So on our ports. And this time, instead of API, I'm making a request to accounts / so let's check the / create user. And you have to be mindful of this / here. I see a lot of people are not adding it. So if you don't want to add it, you just remove it. But once it is there, you just have to copy the whole thing in this string. And then you just have to, that's the endpoints, right? So if we send this, we should get an error back saying username, email, and password is required, right? So we change this to JSON, and then we input the username, test user, email is test at, so this should be double quotes, test at example.com, and password. Yep, and password is some password, right? So yeah, great. So we send this, returns the user ID, username, and the email. So yep. So we have created a new user. So this authenticates a new user. And if you check your DB, this user has been created. So you can also check on how to add some other fields, right? Linking up these models with like creating a full profile, a lot of things. So you could try this out using the token authentication, right? You could try it out using the JSON web token. There are a lot of resources online, right? And which I'm going to be posting like on Jazuri board resources, and also this class, right? Okay, so we have this, and also the code I have here, I'm also going to push to GitHub, and I would send the link also to probably the Python channel also to this report. So so it's actually 1 hour, and we have come to the end of today's class, right? I really hope you guys have learned 1 or 2 things. You don't have to, as I've always said, you don't have to cram anything. The documentation is always there for you, right? If you need to access anything, just go to documentation and then you find the answer. Google is there also. A lot of these things have been done by thousands of developers, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Something you could just go up on the internet, get all these things, right? So I really hope you guys enjoy the class, and I look forward to seeing you guys doing lots and lots of these things, right? So I wish you all a very good night, and yeah, cheers guys, bye.